Now on Impact, South Florida Representative Carlos Curbelo gave the Republican response to President Obama's State of the Union address on Tuesday night, a prominent speaking spot for the congressman brand new to Capitol Hill. And joining me now, Congressman Carlos Curbelo. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us again here on Impact.
Good to be here with you.
Boy, a lot has transpired since the last time you were here. You were sworn in as representative of the District 26. You attended your first State of the Union address, and you had the privilege of being asked to give the response in Spanish. First of all, what was it like to be there at the State of the Union in this historic day, and as a freshman congressman?
Well, let me tell you, no matter who the president is, just being in the chamber for that event where everyone in the United States government, no matter the party, comes together, listens, and really has a dialogue about the future of the country was a special experience. My guest, because we're all allowed to take one guest up to the gallery, was my wife. She has sacrificed so much during the campaign and since then that I wanted her to be there. And it was quite special to be there, and it really reminds you what a special country we live in.
Was it what you expected?
Well, I wasn't satisfied with the speech. I thought the president walked in with rose-colored glasses, saying that everything was fine in this country, from the economy to our conflicts overseas. We don't agree with that. We think that there are two economies in this country, one for the well-to-do, which is doing quite well, and then one for everyone else, where there's a lot of people still struggling, still working part-time jobs when they want full-time jobs. So we think we have a lot of work to do, and of course overseas we see a lot of threats and problems for the United States, whereas the president kind of glossed over that. So
we're going to talk about some of those issues a little later on, but first of all, how was the process that you got chosen to give the rebuttal, if you will, in Spanish?
Well, I was on the House floor voting, and Kathy McMorris Rodgers, who's the chair of the House Republican Conference of the 247 Republicans in the House, came up to me, and I was having a conversation with someone else, and she was kind of hovering, so I was wondering what was up. And then when I was finished speaking, I turned to her and said, "Kathy, what's going on?" And she said, "Well, the speaker has selected you to give the response in Spanish." And I was honored. I couldn't believe it, that I had only been there for 2 weeks and that they had chosen me, but I accepted, and I did the best I could.
Let's talk about a topic that I know is very important to you and to many here in South Florida, and that's the normalization of relations with Cuba. The president addressed that as well in his State of the Union address, saying we are ending a policy that was long past its expiration date. When what you're doing doesn't work for 50 years, it's time to try something new. Now, many agree with that notion, but you do not. Tell us why.
You know, Jackie, it's a disingenuous argument. Sure, it's been 56 years since the Cuban regime came to power, but to suggest that U.S. policy alone, without assistance from the rest of the world, could topple the Cuban regime is just unrealistic and dishonest, in my opinion. There's 190 other countries in the world that have full diplomatic and commercial relationships with Cuba. Hasn't that policy failed too? So our policy has been successful in denying the Cuban government the profits that it seeks from doing business with the United States, and in preventing the Cuban government from becoming cash rich. What did the Cuban government do when they used to have access to capital in the 70s and 80s? They had their military deployed throughout the world, opposing our military interests. They were collaborating even more closely with enemies of the United States. So our policy has been successful. Now, are the Castros still in power? Yes, but that's not our fault. The Castros will probably be in power until they die, and then once Fidel and Raul Castro are out of the picture, we will probably be able to have a normal relationship with Cuba.
The highest-ranking diplomat, Roberta Jacobson, went to Havana this week to meet with the Cuban delegation over there, talking about many topics, including travel, including the embargo, and of course a U.S. embassy for Havana. Do you think that the Republican-led House will ever vote for an embassy in Havana?
No, and as a matter of fact, Senator Rubio, Senator Lindsey Graham, and others have already stated that they will do everything they can to block any funding for any of these expanded diplomatic relationships with the Cuban government. Jackie, we need to analyze this Cuba initiative in the context of President Obama's broader foreign policy. This is the administration of the failed Russia reset. This is the administration of the red lines in Syria that were ignored later. This is the administration of sanctions relief for Iran. The president thinks that we can sit down with these enemy governments and that all will be well. It just doesn't work that way. Fidel and Raul Castro for 56 years have been doing the same thing, opposing United States interests all over the world, torturing, murdering, throwing people into jail. They are not going to change just because the United States is now stretching out its hand. They're going to slap us in the face the way that they have been doing for 56 years. And since the president isn't leading on this issue, it's incumbent upon Congress to do so.
Let's talk about the embargo, because that's one thing that the president also wants to lift is the embargo against Cuba. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz was in our show last week as well, talking about that. And she says that it shouldn't be lifted unless there are free elections held in Cuba. Do you think that that's what most people believe about the embargo?
U.S. law is very clear. The embargo can only be lifted by Congress and under specific circumstances, which, by the way, are very basic. Freedom for all political prisoners, scheduling of free elections, and restoration of basic human rights such as freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. There are not a sufficient number of votes in Congress today to change that policy. If you were watching the speech when the president called for it, most of the chamber remained seated because there's a strong bipartisan majority, as evidenced by Ms. Wasserman Schultz's comments, against unilateral concessions for a government that doesn't deserve any.
It was great, though, to see Alan Gross there at the State of the Union as a guest of Michelle Obama.
We're very happy that Mr. Gross is free. He was detained unjustly by the Cuban government for 5 years. The shame in it all is that the Obama administration really provided a blueprint for the rest of our enemies throughout the world, because essentially the Cuban government has been rewarded by the Obama administration for having held an American hostage with 3 Cuban spies that were convicted of spying against the United States. One was convicted of conspiring to murder U.S. citizens.
But they did release 52 prisoners,
only to re-imprison 5 of them. So, Jackie, look, I wish that I could believe that the Cuban government is going to change and that engagement with the United States is going to make a difference for the Cuban people and is going to change the nature of the Cuban regime. But it's been 56 years. We know these men. We know their tactics. We know their nature. They're not going to change.
Let's move on, because it seems the president, despite the GOP wave after the midterm elections, is still forging forward in these last 2 years of his lame duck presidency. Can anything really be accomplished in a bipartisan way for the president in these last 2 years?
I'm hopeful we can, even though it was very discouraging to sit in that chamber and listen to the president lecture on bipartisanship only to act in a very partisan way. For example, the president called for more investment in transportation and infrastructure projects. We agree. But right after that, he made a kind of stinging comment with regards to the Keystone Pipeline, which is a major infrastructure in this project that in this country that passed the House with Republican and Democratic support, and he said he would veto it.
So why does he want to veto it?
He just doesn't like it. The White House has never been clear about why they want to veto this. They just keep downplaying its benefits, saying, well, it's not American oil. Well, the jobs that it's going to create aren't permanent. And those really aren't good excuses, especially when the State Department, the President's State Department, has said that this would be a project that's very good for the economy. So I do think that we can work together on transportation and infrastructure, on tax reform, on trade. It was actually the only issue when the President mentioned trade where Republicans stood and Democrats remained seated. So there are some issues where we can work together.
The war
Absolutely, and I am ready to see the president's resolution, because we need to fund our military and make sure that we can fight back against Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. But we really need the president to not just talk about bipartisanship, but to act in a bipartisan way and to listen. The way he said, after the election, he said, "I heard the American people." Well, it didn't seem like he had heard them loud and clear when he went to the chamber.
We have about a minute to go. President Obama talked about the economy, how much better the economy is doing. But Senator Marco Rubio says too many people are not experiencing it. He said to lift more Americans into the middle class, we need to move forward with a 21st century agenda that ensures an equality of opportunity, not one that doubles down on outdated proposals to tax and spend more.
And that's absolutely right. Look, the president before the last election said, my policies are on the ballot. He said it. No one put those words in his mouth. Well, the American public turned over control of the Congress to Republicans, and that was a rejection of the first 6 years of the Obama presidency, where we did have tax increases, big government solutions, over-regulation of business. So what we need to do is swing the pendulum back now so that we can really make this economy grow for everyone.
But it is doing better. The economy is doing better. You'll concede to that?
It is doing better on the surface, and it is doing better for people that have big investments in the stock market, for business owners. It is certainly doing better, and that's a good thing. But the people I worry about are those that are making low wages, that have seen no growth in their wages, the people that are working part-time, because a lot of the job growth we've seen in the past few years are part-time jobs. So how do we make this economy grow robustly, and how do we allow the economic recovery to reach everyone, all of our families? That is what the Republican Congress is focused on. That's why we passed jobs bills, we passed Keystone, we passed the repeal of the 30-hour work week under Obamacare, which is costing income and hours to so many workers. That's what we're focused on. We've gotten support from many Democrats in the House. We've worked with Democrats like Gwen Graham from Florida up in the Panhandle. She's voted with us on a lot of these issues. And we want to continue passing bills in a bipartisan way. We just hope the president will sign them.
Well, you have your work cut out for you.
A lot. It's a
Congratulations
lot of work.
once again.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here
Congressman
with you.
Curbelo. Still to come here on Impact, the frightening and inspirational story of a human trafficking victim, plus what Miami-Dade police are doing to crack down on the crime epidemic. Next.